Hello, thank you for joining us. We have a very important announcement to make. We're going to be talking about the current global context and the impact on the 14th International AWID Forum, leading us to move the date to September 2021. Pull out your agendas, write down September 2021. That's when we're having the next AWID Forum. And here with me today, we have AWID's co-executive directors, Hakima Abbas and Cindy Clark. And they'll be sharing their insights on how the AWID board came to the decision to change the date of the next AWID Forum, as well as all the ways in which we are continuing our Feminist Realities Journey in the meantime. Whether you're here with us live or if you're watching the recorded video later, please post your comments and questions in the comment section. And even if we logged off after you've written your question, we'll respond it afterwards, after the live session has ended. We're also sharing a link in this comment section for anyone who wants to stay in touch. Sign up to be part of this journey and be sure to check out that sign up form list so that you can continue having information. So, Hakima, Cindy, to kick things off, can we talk a little bit about the implications of the global pandemic on planning a forum? Why did we have to change the dates?
Thanks, Maggie. So it feels like it's been a long process with this forum. There have been lots of deliberations and considerations. And of course, with the COVID-19 pandemic, there is some of the obvious public health concerns, travel restrictions. So in our reflections with the board, it was clear that we felt January was likely just not viable very concretely. We wouldn't be able to bring together the folks that we want to bring together for an AWID forum. But it's also a moment for us in relation to the forum, our work more broadly, and I imagine it's like this for many other feminist organizations, of some soul searching. So does a forum make sense in this moment? Is this what movements need now? And what's the best role that AWID can play in this time? So that's been kind of the focus of many of the conversations that we've been having along the way. I think with the board, with staff, with our members, with movements that we work with, we know that the pandemic and the response to the pandemic has really had a differentiated impact on our bodies, our health, our livelihoods, and on the space that we have for influencing and organizing. And the COVID-19 pandemic is layered on many other crises that communities were already facing, and it's exacerbating their impact on people's lives. We know that states are using the pandemic as an excuse to attack activists and to shut down dissent. And we hear from many feminist groups that they're finding themselves challenged in this moment to continue the work with their communities because they can't move. Contact is restricted. They're needing to find new ways to organize. They're being called upon to redirect work and resources for humanitarian and relief responses. They're facing the difficulty that we all have with the uncertainty around the future, and some in very concrete ways, uncertainty around funding, as many funders are cutting back some of their supports. And so at the same, as we were reflecting about the difficulty or the non-viability of proceeding with a physical AWID forum in January 2021, what was clear to us was that the political project of bringing feminist realities to the front so that feminist systemic alternatives are really shaping whatever we rebuild or reconfigure beyond the pandemic is as relevant as ever, and maybe even more so. Hakima, I don't know if you want to build.
Yeah, maybe just to add to that last point, even though the forum has been postponed, the political project that we've been engaged in since 2017, since the beginning of the strategic plan at AWID, around feminist realities, which are the systemic alternatives that feminists are putting forward, has become so much more relevant. I think we'd all agree. And when we see the news around the pandemic, some of the most uplifting news is about how feminists and other social movements are organizing to build those alternatives. So be it the mutual aid networks or the ways in which we're taking over private hospitals and putting them to public use, and the ways in which even governments are thinking about economies differently. So this is a moment where we think the project around feminist alternatives and feminist realities is really important. Of course, we grappled with the question of whether to do the forum online. we're all doing so much better organizing online these days by necessity, but we all also know, I'm sure, that it's not the same. And there are aspects of the AWID forum that just can't translate to online activities. A lot of that is about just being in the same room as people with whom you share political vision and you share camaraderie and solidarity and support. And so being in that space doesn't translate very effectively to a virtual space. So we are holding those September dates, but of course with no guarantees and with the complexity of the moment and having to continually monitor the situation from a safety perspective, from the perspective of travel restrictions. And of course, that's how we think about the forum generally, but in this moment, that's also heightened.
Yes, definitely. As a movement support organization, be sure that we are listening and we will not be defeated by this pandemic. There will be physical distancing, but no social distancing here. We want to keep these connections going. So I want to ask you, should people go and run to buy their tickets right now? Or are we saying, let's wait till March?
We're saying wait till March. Make your plans, block your calendar. We are fully committed to doing an in-person forum in September 2021. And it might look a little different, right? We're going to be seeing how many people are going to be prepared to travel in that moment. We have sort of a series of criteria that we'll be using so that by March, we can make the decision that there are enough countries that are able to travel with few restrictions. We can reasonably safely bring folks together. And there's still a desire and a thirst among the activists that we want to convene to come together in that physical space. So we'll be continuing to monitor the context over the next few months. By March, if all things are where they need to be, we'll open registration at that time so that we can start the concrete driving toward the physical event. But in the meantime, we don't have to wait, right? It's not that we have to wait to physically come together to be able to start some of those conversations. And that's what the Feminist Realities Journey is all about.
That's a great point. We are excited about starting this journey together. And as we've said, the forum is a stop in this longer feminist realities journey, which is an important political project for us. So what's going to happen with the feminist realities journey? Since we move now the dates of the physical forum to September, what's happening with the journey?
Many things are happening with the journey. There are lots of conversations, but also movement building processes that we're instigating and starting from now until the forum. And they center around a few ideas. So one is around exchange. So we still think, as I said, this is a really important moment for feminist realities and for people to both kind of get the opportunity to hear about how others have done systemic alternatives, really put them into practice, but also learn from some of the lessons of where that hasn't worked or what has failed. What do we need to do better on as feminists? And so the exchanges between groups will be really important in this moment. And in some ways, we've already started a lot of that exchange. There'll also be the intimate, close conversations around some of the topics that emerge around alternatives. So for instance, what has feminism got to do with alternatives? And what do alternatives got to do with feminism? We want to have really in-depth conversations between feminists about some of these issues so that we can build out the analysis. And again, importantly in this moment, build out the analysis of how we further to create a better world in this moment. And then lastly, there's also the how-tos, like the very concrete, practical things that we can all learn, like responses. There's an amazing queer responses to disasters in the Pacific. Can we all learn a bit about what that looks like, queering disaster response, and figure out what that means in terms of our own context and adaptability and learn all of those skills together.
And very pragmatically, I can imagine some people listening to this are thinking, I submitted a proposal for an activity at the forum. What's going to happen to it? We were really thrilled at the response that we got to the call for activities. So there were over 800 submissions, which is both wonderful and difficult because we can only fit so many into the in-person forum. But that's exactly the pool of experience and proposals that we're drawing on for this journey. And so even the submissions for the forum are not going to waste. We're able to bring folks together now online, and we're still holding them. So as we had shared before, for the first time ever, we did a participatory selection process so that from that 800, our staff and forum committee shortlisted down to 130. And within that group, there was a voting process, a peer voting, to be able to shortlist sessions. As our forum director says, they're tucked away in a magic box. We haven't peeked yet. We're waiting to see. Come early next year, we'll open the box and see what's there. And we'll be going back to everyone who was shortlisted to confirm that they're still able to participate and to think how their ideas or activities have evolved in light of the shifting context. It is not a moment for new proposals. We'll assess in early 2021 if we need and have capacity to open up for new proposals. But for now, we're going to stick with the amazing richness of what we had already received, and we're thrilled to have that.
Great. So if you're part of the early birds that already submitted your proposals, know that you might already be in. And we will be waiting until later to communicate the final selection, because part of what we want is also to provide some room for changes in those proposals. Will the proposals be exactly the same as they were submitted, or will there be changes? How's that gonna vary?
Yeah. And I mean, I think there's plenty of room for us to say, you know, proposals may change and evolve. As we were saying before, we know the size of the forum may evolve depending on people's desire to travel. Maybe it's 1,000-person forum and not a 2,000-person forum. That will shape the volume of activities that we're able to do on site. But nevertheless, I think it's important to emphasize that we're still fundraising for a strong access fund. Those are the travel scholarships that folks can access to be able to come to the forum. And that remains a critical part of keeping the forum accessible. So that commitment is still there.
Okay, so reminding folks to sign up for the journey list so that you can get information on this upcoming activities. What are some of those upcoming conversations that we have?
Well, Hakima alluded to some of them already, and it will be a mix of things that are broadly open and public and others that are closed for deeper debate and discussion, where we hope that we'll be able to go into more depth and potentially package that content in the coming months as well. But there are things like an exchange that lasts over several months among feminists in different regions that are thinking about and working on healing from a political perspective and how we do collective care in authoritarian contexts. There are things like a cookbook that will draw on feminist histories and recipes that have nourished communities through the pandemic and are providing concrete and alternative models to think about food security and food sovereignty. A dialogue among groups that are practicing kind of against criminalization and destigmatization among sex workers, among women using drugs, racialized women, trans folks. We're talking about how we do really concrete skills building, as Hakima was saying, whether it's queering disaster response or internal organizational practices and how we organize in non or less hierarchical ways to get where we need to go. Those are just some of the examples, and there will be many more that we'll continue to make available.
Sounds exciting. So if I'm an activist, why should I join these conversations? What do I get out of this?
I think you get so much. I think the conversations, the idea is that they're nourishing, right? And I think in this moment where many people are feeling somewhat isolated, where it's very difficult to connect with others, even very close to you physically, let alone the others on the other side of the world. But also in a moment where we're all going through differently, but all going through this pandemic, and this pandemic is exacerbating existing conditions for so many people. I think the exchange, the learning, the sharing, the being able to be in solidarity with one another is really important in this moment.
And Maggie, one thing I would say that we've talked quite a bit internally, we're in a moment where so many of us are locked down or our movements restricted, where we're saturated with webinars, right? And we had this debate, how many more webinars do we want to put out into the world? And yet at the same time, in so many of the conversations I've been part of, there is such a thirst for more chance to talk and engage at a deeper level and to learn and find ways to support each other through this. And so we're being really intentional about the methodology in ways that can kind of fill some of that while we can't come together face to face and get that sort of spark that we get from being in a room with 2,000 other amazing feminists from around the world, that we do bring that the hope, the inspiration, the sense of solidarity amongst us in this time.
And that's why I think it's really important to emphasize that we're not talking about just a series of webinars, but really a movement building process on the issue of feminist alternatives. And so we really invite everyone to join that process, not just some events.
Yes, this is very important. We're asking you to roll up your sleeves and get in there, get in the conversation, in the co-creation. It might look like it's just another Zoom invitations, but we guarantee that we're really putting things together so that it'll be an intimate dinner party conversation, a curated conversation among folks. Imagine connecting with folks from the other side of the world that are also trying to change the world just like you are, and that are not only trying, that managing to change the world and build through those cracks in the system. So this is part of the invitation that we're putting out in preparation of the forum. We know the excitement is coming. I can't wait for September 2021 to be here, but I also can't wait to connect with everyone throughout the world in these conversations that we're putting together. So again, September 2021, please wait for the final communication of the proposals that are going to come through. And we will be talking again in March to see hopefully how the frontiers and the airports have opened up a little bit more, to make sure that we can all travel in a safe manner, and if that is the right moment. And in the meantime, please connect to our mailing list to receive updates on this Feminist Realities Journey.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right, so thank you, Hakima and Cindy, for this conversation, this information. And we're very glad to go on this Feminist Realities Journey with all of you. And we know we're in it together as things shift along the way. Our collective co-creation keeps us afloat and steering a path towards all of our liberation. Look out for much more from us in the coming weeks. And remember to check out the link in the comment section and sign up to our mailing list. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks.
Thanks, Maggie.